sisters, we've come to the end of another week. Today in our Bible reading plan, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 18. What I wrote at the top of my journal for this chapter is the destructive power of insecurity and jealousy. The destructive power of insecurity and jealousy. You'll recall that God had rejected Saul, Israel's first king, rejected him from being king over Israel, and his descendants would not be king either. And Saul is suffering from an evil spirit that manifests itself in temper tantrums, mental illness, paranoia, outburst of anger, and so on. And even before that, it's obvious that he was insecure, which led to him being jealous of David and David's success. And as time passed, he became more jealous and more angry and more resentful of David. In chapter 18, verses 6 through 9, it happened as they were coming, when David returned from killing the Philistine, that's Goliath, that the women came out of the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. They weren't against Saul at all. They celebrated him. The women sang as they played and said, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And then Saul became very angry, for this saying displeased him. And he said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, but to me they have ascribed thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom?" And Saul looked at David with suspicion from that day on. The NIV says, rather than suspicion, kept a close eye on him. He was angry and jealous. And some people are like that. They struggle for others to get more recognition than them, for others to get more credit than them. And that was Saul. He was very insecure. And so in verse 11, he attempted to murder David. And verse 12 says, Saul was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. And in verse 15, we read that all Israel and Judah loved David, or verse 15 rather, when Saul saw that he was prospering greatly, that David was being blessed, he dreaded him. He was afraid of him. And so Saul gives David a key leadership role in the military and tells him to lead his military forces into battle against the Philistines. The real motive, when you read the chapters, was he was hoping David would be killed in battle and his problem would be solved. But that doesn't happen. David leads them to victory, and David's popularity increases, and Saul gets worse. In verse 29, then Saul was even more afraid of David. And thus Saul was David's enemy continually. And you'll see that as you read the chapters that follow. Now here's the lesson for us. Insecurity and jealousy can ruin a person because it corrupts their own thinking, corrupts how they read situations, and they overreact, can lead people to manipulate, to accuse, to be suspicious. It ends up always being destructive. In the New Testament, the book of James chapter 3 verse 16, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. Now, here's the thing. People who struggle with insecurity and jealousy make bad leaders. They make bad bosses. They can even make it challenging for you to be their friend because they have this habit of blaming others, this habit of being territorial, of interpreting everything in light of what it says about them, or more correctly, what they think it says about them. I mean, Saul was upset because they sang David killed his 10,000s, Saul killed his... They weren't putting Saul down, they were still praising Saul. But his insecurity caused him to read more into it than was actually there. That's why it's real challenging for people who struggle with insecurity and jealousy, who think about themselves so much, even though they don't want to or don't think they do. It's challenging for them to be good bosses because they're so inconsistent, just like Saul was. Now, I'm not saying every insecure person is like that. Some insecure people, in fact, most, simply are people who lack confidence in their good people. But there are some, particularly if given a position of power, who don't know how to deal with that well because they can't stop thinking about it. Everything makes them look, and therefore they react very badly, very poorly at times. David, by contrast, when you read this chapter, demonstrates humility. You see that in his response to Saul's offer for him to marry his daughter. David just kept doing his job and did it well, with integrity. The last verse of chapter 18, verse 30, then the commanders of the Philistines went out to battle, and it happened as often as they went out that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, and so his name was highly esteemed. David behaved himself the right way, and he garnered more respect and more esteem as a result. I want to recommend 2 books that will help some people. These are 2 of my favorite books. If I made a list of top 10 books, these 2 would be in it. One is called Leadership and Self-Deception. Because if you find yourself putting people in a box, so to speak, and you're always evaluating them, blaming them, being negative, you don't want to take ownership of stuff. Leadership and self-deception can really help you think through this issue of you deceiving yourself with all your self-talk, and you thinking worse of others than you should because of your self-talk. So Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute, I recommend very, very highly. A second book is called Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud. They've both been out a while, especially Necessary Endings. And he helps you think through activities in your life, behaviors, habits that you need to cut out. You can't reform them, you just need to cut them out. He also helps you evaluate relationships and people in the sense of, here's people, your relationship with them can be salvaged, but here are people that, they're not going to change. And sometimes, especially if you're in a leadership role, you need to stop trying to help them change because they're not going to. Now, that may seem harsh, but there are people that, if you're not careful, they're like Saul, and it's never going to get fixed. That's just the reality. So I don't know what you're going to do with this, but that's what I got from this chapter. Have a great weekend. See you Sunday in worship, and then Monday with another devotion as we look at 1 Samuel chapter 19.